Action's on Steven Silverman. Queens under the gun.
Silverman was on the American Poker reality show 2 months, 2 million. It was the highest rated poker reality show in its time slot starring Steve Silverman.
He's raised to 15,000. Dan Smith has Queen Jack suited.
Dan's in rough shape, but he's got the exact kind of hand you can sometimes crack bigger hands with.
He calls. Negranu's out. Azar, Bakar and Siva. Ravensbeck will fold the big blind, so we're heads up to the flop. And that flop is Jack, Jack 5, trips for Smith.
Hi-ya! Steve's almost always going to bet this because he's almost always going to have the best hand.
He does continue for 27,000.
I don't think he's folding.
Nope. He calls.
Dan opts to just calls. There are plenty of hands he could peel a turn with that aren't nearly as strong.
6 of spades on the turn. Smith with a virtual lock on the hand, 98% equity.
None of these cards are really saving Silverman.
Bets again, 65,000.
Now, does Dan raise or just call and go for all his value on the river?
He calls.
River it is.
230,000 in the middle, Silverman with not much more than that behind. The case jack on the river, quads for Dan Smith.
This is just a horrific card for Silverman. He's now got a full house, and in his mind, he's only losing the aces or kings, which probably would have gotten him 3-bet pre-flop.
Mullen.
Silverman shoves.
Oy.
Call.
Dan Smith calls.
Quick check of the quads.
Good in.
No kidding.
That is just brutal.
Steven Silverman eliminated.
Good luck,
y'all. Michael Watson, 6-5 suited. Raises, makes it 22K. Eric Seidel has pocket sixes.
Likely to see a call.
Sure enough, Eric does call. Dan Smith on the button has ace-king.
Dan's almost certainly going to 3-bet here, in position with all that action behind him. And don't forget those massive chips.
He re-raises to 63,000. Sam Chartier's just joined the feature table. He folds. Simon Ravensbeck also has ace-king.
Another ace-king out there. This is going to make things pretty crazy.
Ravensbeck 4-bets to 134,000. Watson and Seidel both fold.
Now this is a little less exciting now since these two are destined to chop.
Smith 5-bets.
I'm all in.
Ravensbeck moves all in, and Smith calls.
This guy Ravensbeck must have some rep considering none of these guys ever appear to be afraid to get it in with him. 96% chance of a chop. No reason to hide that gorge face now.
The flop has 2 spades on it, and Smith holds the ace of spades.
Backdoor sweat.
And there's a spade on the turn. Oh, come on. That would be too gross, right?
Anyone else holding spades? I don't want to know.
Trust me, neither does Ravensbeck.
And the river brings another spade.
Oof. That was less cool than talking about a guy's bachelor party in front of his wife.
That was grotesque.
Dan, it's okay if you want to laugh.
Dan Smith, Jack 9 offsuit. Smith, the overwhelming tournament chip leader.
Been folded to him. He's in relatively late position.
Yeah, he's in the cutoff. He raises to 36,000. Gets rid of Kurzovic on the button.
Kurzovic folds a dominating hand.
JC Alvarado folds the small blind. Mike McDonald has Jack 10 in the big blind.
Also has Smith dominated, but he is out of position.
Looks like Mike will defend, and we will see a flop. That flop, 7, Jack, 9, 2 pair for Smith, the straight draw and top pair for McDonald.
This flop is the worst thing that happened to a McDonald since trans fats got banned.
McDonald checks to the razor. Smith continues for 52,000.
Even though Mike's way behind, top pair and a good gut shot is almost just as good. Just not quite.
McDonald calls.
Looks like he might even think his hand is too strong to raise there.
The turn is another jack, another full house for Dan Smith. McDonald improves to trips.
This is just getting insanely bad. This is the worst thing that happened to a McDonald's since New York City banned large sodas.
McDonald checks a second time. Smith, will bet a second time by the looks of things. Sure enough, 133,000.
There's a good shot. Mike just calls again, wanting Dan to keep repping that jack, which he is doing because he has it.
How much is Mike McDonald going to lose in this hand?
At least another 133,000.
Yeah, he calls, taking us to the river. 462,000 in the pot. No 10 on the river. Smith still good.
Let's see how Mike plays this. Does he lead the river and hope for a call? No, he checks the river and hopes for a bet.
He's going to get it.
He is going to get it.
371,000.
That is a huge bet. Now Mike might be worried Dan's actually got a better jack. This is one of those polarizing bet sizes. Dan's not doing this with most of his non-nut value hands.
Mike calls.
Whoops.
1.2 million chip pot will slide across to Dan Smith.
There's really not much you can do there. You gonna fold 3 jacks? No. Hand was just a cold deck. The worst thing to happen to a McDonald since heart disease.
Dan Smith is now playing nearly 3.5 million. He has more than 3 times the tournament average.
He's riding the chip train up Cha-Ching Mountain. Programming on the Discovery Channel.
Blinds at 8,000, 16,000 with a 2,000 ante. Action has been folded around to Iñat Liviu. The Romanian pro has pocket 10s. And he is raising, makes it 32,000. Ryan Kamaya folds. Steve O'Dwyer will pass the Jack 8.
Woof.
8-7 suited for JC Alvarado.
On the button, yum, yum. If this hand looks delicious, then being in position is like looking at its picture on the menu.
Alvarado will call. Litvinov gives up the small blind. Dan Smith in the big blind as Queen 6 suited.
Dan's getting good pot odds. A call here would be borderline if he didn't have all the chips in the universe, but he does, so it's totes fine.
So Smith calls as well. We are going 3-way to the flop. That flop, 6-9 deuce. Second pair for Smith, an up and down draw for Alvarado. Liviu still leads with 10s.
Liviu was the original raiser.
55.
And he's got the most to protect against.
Dan Smith checks to him. Liviu bets 55,000.
I don't know that this bet will get either of these players to fold, however.
Alvarado calls.
Liviu's actually got 2 blockers to his hand.
Smith calls as well. It's a 3-way to the turn.
Calls a little questionable, but Dan's getting stupid pot odds again.
And he hits another 6 on the turn. Trips for the chip leader.
This is a grosser turn than the twist in the crying game. JC is now dead to 4 outs. Dan all but locks his hand up, and no one's really likely to think this card changed anything.
Dan checks a second time. Liviu bets a second time, 125,000. Action on Alvarado.
He's getting a decent price to chase his straight. Meanwhile, Dan's got a super disguised monster.
Alvarado calls.
JC was getting an even better price, assuming Dan comes along for the ride. And spoiler alert, he's not folding.
But is he raising? No, he's calling.
Dan overcalls on 3 streets. Gotta wonder if anyone's spidey sense is tingling yet.
3-way to the river, which is another 6. This is the second time in the tournament that Dan Smith has had quads.
The second time today. All pairs now have full houses, just like Liviu over there has got.
Smith checks a third time. Liviu now checks as well.
Wow, either a very astute player or a guy who's going to lose value a lot of the time. I'm willing to chalk it up to some kind of insane physical read.
Alvarado with the
now.
He waves the white flag.
Because Liviu somehow has the clairvoyance to check the 6 nuts. Dan Smith gets locked out of the First National Bank of Value, 5th Street branch. Just quads, guys, just quads. These any good? Quads any good?
Over to the other. Pocket sixes for JC Alvarado as we return to the main feature table.
Well, JC's on a bit of a heater.
He raises, makes it 45,000.
Speaking of heaters, this is the one guy at the table running hotter than JC. This kid makes more hands than a mannequin factory.
Dan Smith has King Jack off. Calls from the cutoff.
Speaking of, have you ever seen Mannequin 2 on the move? It's really underrated.
You may be the only person on the planet who's seen that movie. Tobias Reinkemeyer has Jack 9 suited in the big blind.
It's a decent hand, and he's getting ridiculous pot odds.
He calls as well.
Even though we know he's dominated by Dan.
Three-way to the flop. And Tobias Reinkemeyer flops a full house. Dan Smith flops trips. Nothing for Alvarado, the original raiser. Action's been checked to Smith. He bets 85K.
Dan Smith has made another huge hand. This time it's not the biggest, though.
Reinkemeyer calls.
After betting a call, not much shot JC sticks around here.
He folds. Heads up to the turn. Which is a 6. JC's so lucky he folded on the flop. Reinkemeyer checks again. Smith bets again. 181,000.
Sick cooler developing here.
Reinkemeyer calls.
Both players are playing this like they absolutely know they have the best hand, and most of the time they'd both be right. As for right now, Dan is in deep doo-doo.
The river's a king. Smith now has a better full house.
OMG. This kid spikes more than a lie detector on Capitol Hill.
Reinkemeyer checks, hoping to induce some kind of bluff from Smith. This is not a bluff. This is a value bet. 384,000, and it's bound to get paid off. It may even get raised.
This is a slam dunk value raise situation. There are only 2 hands on the planet that are beating you, Kings and King Jack. King Jack is the more believable of the two if it weren't for the fact that it would have to be the case Jack.
Hold on.
Reinkemeyer shoves.
The double check.
Call.
Dan Smith calls, and we lose the German from the tournament.
Like the refrigerators at the Center for Disease Control, this is just a sick cooler.
Good hand.
No kidding.
Tobias, it's okay if you want to scream.
All right, good luck. Yeah.
Back when he was already a millionaire.
Blinds up again, 61-20 with a 20K ante. Kings for Alvarado.
JC's got about 20 bigs.
250.
He raises to 250. Dan Smith has ace-king.
Oh, it's all going in here. Really good spot for JC to double up.
All in. Call.
Smith shoves, Alvarado calls.
Now, even with this loss, Dan's still going to have a monster stack compared to JC. He'll still have more than a 2-to-1 chip lead.
Don't assume it will be a loss. Dan Smith has got lucky from time to time in this tournament.
Truth.
He does have an overcard. He does have 30% equity. The flop has an ace on it.
Oh man, isn't that the story of this tournament? That's the whole story. Dan Smith plays good. Dan Smith gets business end of cooler. Dan Smith gets there. The end.
Might be the one outer.
Just one card in the deck can save JC Alvarado.
Second place is pretty good.
Burn.
Dan Smith is on the verge of lifting the trophy here in Barcelona. The only river card that will stop that happening is the King of Spades. It's a 3. Dan Smith has done it. JC Alvarado is the runner-up, but bow before King Dan. who's earned the super high roller crown.
It was destiny. Kid could do no wrong.